Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Stitching Tales. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
And in today's episode, we wanted to talk a bit about content and all the different channels that we have that we can provide content and trying to reach a larger audience, and of course the ones that are already following us. So Malena, you had this topic idea, so I'm curious about what are your thoughts around it and your struggles.
Well, for me, content creating it doesn't come natural. I kind of struggle with it and to know what to write and how to write it and what to write where, because now previously I was basically only on Instagram, but now I got my website as well with a blog, and now I got a newsletter. Yay! So I'm like, what am I supposed to write where? And I want to find like a good structure for how to work with it in a good and smart way. Because as I said before, I'm not a designer, so coming up with ideas can be really tricky for me. But if I have like a very strict like framework, like something to work from, then I can be creative. But I don't have that at the moment. So I'm just like, ooh, what should I write? Okay, today, oh yeah, I got that idea. So then I just do it. But I don't get a flow in working with it. So I want to pick your brains a little bit and ask how you are working with content making, because you got this. You have been working a lot with content creating for several years, right?
Yeah. I honestly don't feel like I maybe have got it, but at least I have worked a lot with content creation. I don't know how many blog posts I have. I mean, it's closing in on 1,000 blog posts probably over the years. So yeah, and about 200 YouTube videos and such. So yeah, I've been pretty productive. But I agree with you. It's very important to have this kind of flow, because it's really, really difficult to create all this content. And so I'm just curious, which channels are you currently using and have also the ones that you've been thinking about moving forward?
So far I'm mostly on Instagram, but now recently I just like relaunched a new website. So I want to start working on the blog there. So then it's like, what should I write on the blog and what should I write on Instagram? And then of course I want to send out a newsletter, maybe like every other month, I think would be realistic for me. So it's mainly those three channels. And then I have created a Pinterest account that I also want to work with. But I only like updated just a few pictures there yet. I haven't really gotten the time and to focus on that one. But I really like the idea of Pinterest, and I do it on like when I have my own like private projects or things, then I look through Pinterest quite a lot. So I want to do it on also from like a business perspective. So it's mainly those four channels I have. I'm not big into videos. That feels like I would like to, but it's just like too much for me right now. I barely am able to create content for these four channels. So videos are like, no, not at the moment.
Yeah. It's also, I mean, it's challenging, and it's also really time consuming. So it's so hard to excel in every area. And I think a lot of people that are successful are focusing mainly on one primary channel, and then maybe they can repurpose content for other channels. And I think what's interesting, because that we discussed in the episode about newsletter, which is episode 5, if you want to listen, we talked about the fact that if you're starting a newsletter, you need to have some kind of home for the main content. So the newsletter is more like a reader's digest of interesting stuff that you can read the full version on the blog. Or of course, if you have a YouTube channel, you can also do the same, that you have a newsletter where you share your latest videos or similar things. But a newsletter is hard to link to like content on Instagram. Maybe you could link to Reel maybe, but it's not the same thing. So the way I do it mostly is that I often I build like an umbrella of a specific content topic. So and then I try to repurpose that in different channels. And I often do it the old school way, that I actually start with the blog post. And the reason for that is, first of all, I really enjoy blogging, which I know not everyone does, so I understand that. And the good thing about starting with the blog post is that you have that automatic reference when you're doing a newsletter, because then you have provided like a full text article that you can link through. And the thing is that I don't know, I don't think everyone really understands the value of distributing, because when you put so much work into a blog post, maybe a tutorial or something else, then if Google can be helpful, of course, but you also need to get it to other eyeballs, and two big eyeballs are Facebook, your Facebook page, so that you should post your new blog post on that Facebook page, because that is actually a good traffic generator, because people are more prone to leave Facebook to go over to a website than they are if you link to that tutorial in stories on Instagram, because Instagram, it's its own very secluded environment, so people are not as prone as clicking on link on Instagram than on Facebook. And secondly, Pinterest is also a distributor of tutorials, so you can create a pin image for your tutorial. So if you find that, you can go back. So just by doing that, and the fact that you have a newsletter, so you have both Google, you have Facebook, you have Pinterest, and you have the newsletter. So all of a sudden you have lots of different ways of attracting people to your content on a blog post, which means that you will reach a much larger audience than you would on, say, Instagram. So that's my reasoning behind why I think it's so important to start with a blog post, and then you can use repurpose content and snippets from that to create. For me, of course, I do videos for my most popular blog post, but so I think it's good to go back to the old school way. Because I think if you do hard work, it pays off, even though it's very daunting to start, which I think is for you a bit of a struggle right now, that it's a bit overwhelming, that part of the long form content. And
yeah, and I really like it, but I have actually had a blog for quite a long time. I mean, earlier when I lived abroad, I used to blog a lot just to keep my family and friends updated. I do like the format of a blog. Like, you can write longer text, and Instagram is so, you have to keep it so short, and it's a little bit tricky to, I want to talk about this picture, and then, you have to swipe in Instagram, but in the blog you can actually really write it close. I mean, yeah, you can set it up in a totally different way. So I'm looking forward actually to start writing blogs again. It's just the time.
Yeah,
I need to dedicate time to sit down and actually do it. But yeah, no, and I also have a Facebook page. That I forgot about it. That's how much I use it, basically. But how do you use your Facebook page? Is it just straight copy like the blog post there, or how do you do?
Yeah, I'm very hands off on my Facebook page. So what I do is that there are a few publishing apps or programs. I think if some of you are doing more of a professional thing on Instagram, you probably use a program called Later, which is fine. It's good for Instagram. But what I do is that I use a program called SmarterQ. It has a really awful interface, but what it does is that every time I create a new blog post, I add it to that library, to that queue. And then I set a schedule, so it rotates. So the post keeps on posting. Maybe I think it's maybe like every third month. So because I have so much content, so there's no problem that people will get like fatigued with the same type of content. So of course, if you only have 5 blog posts, you can't use that system to. But you can just set the date, maybe repost it like once every 6 months or anything like that. So for me, what I do is just that I add the link in the program, I write a small caption and then I set it and then I forget it. So that's how I work with it. So sometimes I forget because now I have like 5 really good tutorials that I've forgotten to post into Smarter Cube. But when I do, I get a nice chunk of traffic from Facebook users. And I'm not a big presence on Facebook, but people kind of find me. I think you get recommended pages. As it's just I mean, Instagram is growing much faster and the Facebook is not, but for our type of content, one shouldn't ignore Facebook, I think.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's I think it's easier. Yeah, you get suggested a lot of things from Facebook, so in that sense it's very easy to find new groups that you like or pages that you like, so that makes total sense. But how do you because I struggle with this, like really, like from step 1, how do you save pictures to remember where to save them? Like, what are your fold system in your computer, and how do you write your text? Like, do you save them also on your computer, or do you write it straight onto the blog?
Well, that's really great question. So I use both Google Drive and Dropbox, so I pay for both services. But for my blog photos, I use Dropbox. So now, I pay for both. So it's just a hassle to move it around. But the good thing is, of course, that I can access it from anywhere. I mean, I have 2 different computers. I can access it from my work computer. I can access it from my mobile phone. So what I do is basically, I think it's good. Maybe if you have so many that you start with the top level is the year, but I don't. So I just create a new folder which have the text of what I imagine the blog post will be about, like the headline. And then I use, it's a bit more advanced, but I'm using Adobe Lightroom, which is a great batch processor program for the photos. So instead of working with Photoshop 101, I can just do a preset, and then everything I can set exactly the good size, like file size and everything. And then I also, for search, give the file name the same name as the folder and the tutorial. So for instance, if I'm doing a curved waistband sewing tutorial, the images will be named curved band sewing tutorial 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that makes it also easy for Google, but it also makes it easy for me if I want to find it later. So I have one folder for each blog post, roughly. Yeah. And then I have some...
Oh, wait, sorry. What do you mean with the Google? Like when you Google Drive, where you save it, or
No,
like Google
like
search engine?
Search engine, yes. Because,
okay.
Yeah, because
I
of course...
know.
It's gonna... maybe I think it's much more refined now, but of course, you know, if you go to the picture tab, I think it helps. I think it just helps a little bit. I wouldn't like count on it, but it's just also. But the thing is that it's also really good because when you have lots of images later on, it's so nice that when you search for a file, you will find it because you have been so consistent. It's not called image 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or DSC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's why I'm very specific about that particular organization. I'm sure other people have better organization, but it works for me, and I have so many blog posts.
Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, because right now I'm basically saving my pictures, everything in one file, and then also of course like sub files with like all the pictures from a specific. Okay, this is when I took that top pictures. Or t-shirt pictures, and have it in that specific folder then. But then and it's fine when you do it all in the same way, but then I have those few, when it's like, okay, but those photos were for a sewing tutorial, so I have saved them in the folders under the PDF file where I have all those, and then it becomes tricky because then the pictures are like saved different in different folders, different categories. So then, that's when it becomes a bit of a hassle to keep track of them.
Yeah, I understand that. So what I do, if I do a sew along, for instance, for a new pattern, I put it in the blog post folder, and then I name the mother folder like sew along AV cardigan sew along, and then I create subfolders. So for instance, in one folder I have images for hemming, one for the sleeves, because usually you do more than one post. If you're doing a sew along, you can maybe do 3 or 4 or 5 different posts. So I have a folder for each separate post, because otherwise it's also going to be a bit overwhelming to find everything.
And how do you do them with the text?
Yeah. So what I do with the text is that I use WordPress, which I know that you don't, because you're on Wix now. But I think it's worked the same way, because now, because we're writing in English, and English is unfortunately not a first language. So, it's going to be a struggle sometimes. So I use a tool that there's a free version called Grammarly. So what you can do is either just open the Grammarly app and just get an account and write it there and then copy paste, or the Grammarly also works as a plugin. So if you opening your blog, you log into your blog and start a new page in Google Chrome or whatever browser you're using, the Grammarly will help you keep track on spelling and grammatical errors just like you would have in autocorrect if you have several languages when you're using Google. I mean, you can have this like spell check. It works the same way. So, and of course you can the regular Google, but what I prefer with the Grammarly is because grammar is quite hard. I think everyone who studied language would be agree on that. So it's easy when you're born with a language, because then you have this like automatic, you can't explain it, but you hear when it's right and it's wrong. But unfortunately with English, even though we study English as small children in Sweden and Finland, we still don't have there are still some things, at least I know you have worked abroad, Malena, and you work in global companies, but it's still a little bit hard, right, to get English great from.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, and it just those specific words, also how the spelling, tough though thought, those are always like, wait, how, which one was which now?
Yeah, and where and were, and yeah, and also sometimes getting the S right, if something lie or lies, that can. So there are a few things like that, and you can also with Grammarly pick if you want to use American English, UK English, Australian English, or British English. So it's good, because then it will automatically show if you're spelling. Because I think a lot of us mix British English with US English. So sometimes we use realize with an S, and sometimes we use realize with a Z. So it's hard to stay consistent.
That's on another level. As long as it's English for me, I'm fine with it.
Okay, yeah. It's funny though, because some people do note that, I can assure you. Yeah, especially it's a topic.
I can imagine.
Yeah, I.
But do you use that only for like checking like grammar, spelling, those kind of things then?
Yeah, and the great thing about Grammarly is that, because for instance, when I'm doing my sewing books, I always use the premium Grammarly subscription, and it has lots of suggestions on how to reframe your sentences and for clarity and everything like that. So it's super helpful, and it's also now have an HI function, so you can like ask, help me write an introduction for a blog post about how to alter top, or maybe, so you have to be a little bit more specific, but so it gives some decent suggestions so they can also use. So I'm a big fan of Grammarly. Highly recommend it for anyone listening who, and I know a lot of people who are native speakers in English also use Grammarly, because it's hard. Grammar is hard.
Yeah, it is. Definitely. But do you save when you're done with the actual text? Do you save it somewhere, or do you just straight to the blog?
Yeah, straight to the blog. I would actually say that if I write about 80% straight to the blog, you just have to make sure that you have an autosave function, because that will happen eventually, that your browser will crash and then you have lost it. So I think the good way of doing it is using maybe Grammarly or Google Docs or some other type of like cloud-based, because Grammarly you can save all your files as well. But for me, it's just too much hassle. The images is enough to organize, so I'm not that precious about the blog text. I just usually write it straight to the in the browser or the blog.
But you said in some previous episode, but maybe it was about newsletter then, that you easily can send out like a similar newsletter that you sent out earlier year. How do you save? What kind of structure do you have there?
That in the newsletter, I also write it from scratch in my newsletter software. I'm using MailerLite, which I know that you got them too, right? So
yes.
it's just that then it just saves all your old emails. So, and you can also save them as templates, so you can repurpose just part of it. So I don't really touch that. But the good thing is because sometimes writing is the hardest part, but once you figure out a way of like communicating what you want to say, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. So for instance, if I'm doing a newsletter about a blog post, I'm not going to start writing from scratch a different type of introduction. Maybe I change a word or two, but I usually just do copy paste. So for me, once the thinking process is done, then I definitely want to make sure that I use it as much as possible. It could be a caption to an Instagram post as well. I mean, it doesn't really matter if it's the same. No one is going to notice anyway.
Oh, but that sounds convenient. Yeah, because you don't have to reinventing the wheel every single time. That's the thing that if you do it on multiple, like on a regular basis, like it just goes a little bit smoother then, and that's really what I want to achieve someday.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, and I think you will. It's just a training thing. It's like you have to like activate other parts of your brains that you're not really used to doing. Because what I alluded to in the beginning of this episode is that I would say that I am very good at thinking about systems and producing content and having like a very holistic perspective. But that doesn't mean that I am able to execute it all the time. And I know that when I'm really systematic and do a lot of planning and are very much into like a consistent content creation, I'm just so much more quicker, and I'm always seeing like the ways I can repurpose content. But if I'm like have taken a break and it's about to start again, then I can very much relate to where you are right now, Malena, because I have the same challenges, even though I'm also, I should, perhaps you don't know, but I'm a journalist by trade and I work in communications now. So what I do like all day, every day is just producing content, just writing. So for me, you have to, it's like with the muscle memory, you have to keep it going, because the more you do it, the better you get it. But so it's just that little hurdle that you have to get over in the start, I think, and then it's going to be so much easier for you.
Yeah, I hope for that. And Pinterest, do you have Pinterest?
Yes, I have Pinterest. Yeah.
How do you work with that?
Pinterest is a good thing to have. I guess you can use Pinterest for many different ways. Pinterest has changed a lot, but initially I think a lot of people used Pinterest as a brand to drive traffic to your content, regardless if you're selling clothes or if you're having sewing tutorials. You just create those pin images, and you do that because when people visit your site and they love a tutorial, they want to pin it to a board, and then they will obviously pin whatever image that comes up. So it might not be the most helpful one, but when you're also pinning yourself, you can pick which image, or you can create a graphic specifically for Pinterest that shows with text and the image what the tutorial is about. So that's traditional has been the biggest way of doing Pinterest for bloggers. And then, of course, you can have patterns, image of your patterns that go straight to your shop. I know there are more e-commerce options as well, and Pinterest also now have a similar function as Reels. So if you do a video, you can basically, I think, repurpose it for both, of course, Reels. You can do it on Facebook, you can do it on TikTok, you can do it on YouTube Shorts and Pinterest. So from my understanding, the formatting is very similar. So that's also a thing you can use it for. And it's probably much more, because I'm not really staying on top of Pinterest, but I know it's a very powerful tool because it has a lot of options, and also it's less how should I say, it's less demanding, because now you can comment, but it's not like a social network, if you mean. It's more like a distribution and inspiration network. So it requires very little maintenance compared to, say, Instagram, for instance.
And maybe a stupid question then, but if you write, say, a blog post and you have several pictures there, how do you do to get them to Pinterest then? I mean, do you use the same file and just add them to the blog and then add it to the Pinterest, or do you, do you like pin the blog post? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean. So what you do is that you, just like with the Grammarly app, you just add an extension to your browser. So then you just right-click on the image that you want to share to your account on Pinterest, and then it automatically links to your account. And then I think you sometimes, sometimes the picture that you right-click is the one that is shared. Otherwise, you have to pick, because you get like a window of 5 or 6 images, and then Pinterest imports the I think the headline and the first paragraph of the blog post. So you can use tags, hashtags, and things like that if you want to do more advanced stuff. But as I said, it's basically just a right click and a second click. You have to like click 2 times and then it's done. So it's extremely smooth. And the thing is, it's the easiest thing, and I have now a backlog of probably 10 tutorials which I haven't done this on. So, and then of course people will of course also, so when I go into my Pinterest stats, I can see that the most popular pins are people that have randomly pinned some image. So I don't have control of everything, but yeah, Pinterest has been an extremely important traffic tool for me.
And if if other people pin your pictures, do they still like, does the link to your blog post automatically happen?
Yeah,
or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just that maybe they have like a picture that isn't like relevant because they just pin it to their own board, but it kind of becomes the motherboard, so for the mother image. So I think there are ways of how shall I say, how to stop people from pinning less helpful images. But I think that some plugin you have to get, or maybe it's included in the Wix interface. I don't know, but it's a little bit of an issue, of course.
Well, that's good to know that I don't need to specifically add that picture and like rewrite something, link to the blog post, and like you can do it in a better way.
Yeah, it's very simple. I don't think you have to do anything else. Just getting started. I mean, you can always do high level stuff, but I mean, I think good is better than perfect. I mean, done is better than perfect.
Done is better than perfect. Yes,
yeah, exactly.
That's my motto.
Yeah, you're very good at that. I have more issues with that, but I should at least give you that advice right now because it's very helpful.
Yeah. No, when it comes to like social media writing, it's like, okay, there the bar is done. Done is better than perfect. Just get something out.
I love the idea of good is better than perfect. That's like that's a new tagline. That's a tagline for a podcast. Good is better than perfect.
Yeah, it could be a new thing. But do you have any like goals or like how many posts you want per month or per week for your blog or for Instagram? Do you have anything like, how consistent do you try to be?
Oh, that's a great question. I should say that for several years I was very consistent that I posted on the blog 2 times a week, video on YouTube once a week, and Instagram about 2 to 3 times a week in the feed, because the stories, of course, stories as well, but reels and stuff weren't a thing back then. Everything has gone to the wayside. I have absolutely no consistency on any of those platforms right now. But yeah, of course, if you post more, you grow more. I think that's the so yeah, maybe I try to think on my blog. I would say now, because I'm doing quite a lot of blog posts. It's definitely more than one a month. It's probably about two or three. Which I think is a great number, especially now, because I mean, who else is sewing blogging? Not many. So it's not that it's not swamped with new content that you have to fight through. So I think it's just the bigger businesses, sewing businesses, they are the ones doing like sewing blogs, and of course a few hobbyists as well. But it's nothing like it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and how do you decide, the actual content, what to write about? How do you come up with topics?
It's a combination of things that I like to write about and things that I know are successful. So I think you need to find that sweet spot, because it takes a lot of time to create a blog post with all the images and the text and formatting and everything. So I think you need to find something that you like to write about. I think that's helpful. So I write about things that I know is popular, but I also have a personal interest in. And not all my blog posts are like, it's just, sometimes I just show makes that I've done, because I like to do that. I like to take photos. I love to do the styling. And those are, of course, not my most read posts. It's just because I enjoy it.
No, but that sounds good. Yeah, because you have to have those passion products every now and then. That is not the most advanced tutorial ever. It could just be something like, yeah, I like this.
Yeah, I think so. And I love because we, as if you don't know, we're both based in Sweden, and Sweden has had a very strong blogging culture, not particularly with sewing, but there are people that are making a very nice full-time living of doing blogs, and several of those has kept going, and I think it's been amazing what they have managed to achieve by having the blog as their main hub, and then doing other things on other platforms. So to me, it's very inspiring to see the blog is not dead, even though you might feel it is, because everyone left the sewing blogs for Instagram, for instance. But yeah, it's still. I think it's going to be an important format to keep working on, as long as search on Instagram is not that helpful and.
Yeah, I think that's the huge benefit with blogs, that if you search for something, that then you can actually find really old blog post, but still relevant, because the topic is, tutorials will, forever be relevant. Sewing technique doesn't get old, So yeah, it makes total sense. And it was so funny because I had my blog, my old one on patternbymalena.com. I actually had some posts about fitting issues. And then I didn't update the blog, behind the scene updates, so it wasn't working anymore. And then one reader actually contacted me on Instagram and was like, "Why is your blog not working? I've saved that post because I go back to it a lot, and I want to share it with a friend." I was like, "Oh, somebody actually read and saved it." So then I did a lot of updates, but now I moved all my posts to my new website. So that's really it's encouraging to make new posts about because I guess sewing tutorials and fitting problems. I mean, those are like the best thing you can blog about because people search about those constantly. It will never
Exactly.
get old.
No, it's gonna stay relevant for 10 years. So, do you have any posts now? Because you have already a lot of contents, but are you considering creating some new posts now? And what type of topics have you thought about doing?
Yeah, so I have, I mean, in my mind, like planning a lot of blog posts. I think, first of all, like an introduction of me, like who I am, what I do, which I also will link to my newsletter, since I think I have a lot of new followers there on the newsletter that I don't have on my Instagram account. So I want to give like a presentation of myself, basically. And then I'm thinking like, I have like 9 PDF patterns now. So, I mean, create post about each patterns with pattern hacks, how to update them, how to make them. I have many basic garments, but how to make small changes and get like a new style from that. And also, well, about each pattern as well. I could do. I mean, how many posts like about
Yeah.
fitting issues? Like if you want to do this adjustment, I mean, we have talked a lot about that in the book, obviously, but go really deep, dig deeper into each specific issues. So I mean, there is just like, you could write how many blog posts. I mean, we wrote a book about it, so you can write how many blog posts. Like, it's just a matter of time and how much energy you want to put into it. So I was thinking a little bit like having like, okay, well, first I take the Hazelhen T-shirt and write some pattern hacks about that, some fitting adjustments, and package that also and make it into a newsletter once I'm done the blog post. So I got, and also I talked to this to my sister actually. I was home last weekend. And she also gave like a great tip that, but you know, like we just went on a skiing holiday and sewing a merino like underlayer. I mean, that could be a great thing to do with your T-shirt pattern. I was like, yeah, that's really good. But you know, then I have to sew the sample, take photos, and you know, it just takes time. And she was like, well, I mean, you don't have to sew, like take picture. You can just like give inspiration and fabric recommendation, and like you can do this kind of garments as well. And I was like, right.
Yeah.
You don't actually have to make a sample on everything you write. Good. I'm taking notes. And I was like, okay, yes, fabric recommendations, print recommendation, color recommendations for this season. I mean, yeah, no, you don't have to actually make and take your own photos and samples, and because that's, I think, the most time-consuming part.
Yeah.
So yeah, now I have so many ideas of what to write, what to do, but right now in my headspace, I'm all focusing on my next PDF pattern, Bilberry top, and so I'm not really there yet. I can't sit down and start writing right now. But everything is like marinating.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got ideas.
Yes, you have so many ideas, and I think it's going to be absolutely wonderful. And I love your ideas, and I think you're spot on. And I think like the phone line, their newsletter, have the sewing the trends. I mean, you can just, as you say, if some type of fabric or print becomes popular, you can show some new fabrics in shops and just, as an inspiration for how to like update your patterns for a specific trend. So I think it's so helpful to do that, and that's also a wonderful way of producing content for the newsletter as well, like ideas how to update your Hazelhen t-shirt pattern, for instance, because it's such a versatile. It can be an activewear top, it can be a dressier top, it can be like, as you say, a merino top. So you have so many different options. It could be a pyjama top. I mean, you have all these options because it's such a versatile pattern. So your sister was absolutely brilliant in that recommendation. And another thing also is good that if you're doing, for instance, like a theme on different pattern hacks, it's very easy to organize. So you can create. I think it's used to be called sneeze pages. It's kind of like sneeze when you're sneezing. It's you have this collection. So, and that's automatically, you can you can automatically organize it. So it creates separate pages. So for instance, I have separate pages. So for instance, my so long blog post, for instance, if it's linked in every post. So if you click that, you get like a view with theater image for each and different blog post. So it's a nice way of collecting visually. So I have, tutorial pages for all my jeans posts and videos. For instance, I have one of those, and I have one for my cover stitch material. So it's a really nice way of organizing things, because especially as you already have all the blog posts, you can actually do a little bit behind the scenes stuff and try to organize them in a way that becomes easier for the reader to go deeper and find more material than just a single post, because you also want people to stay in your ecosystem as long as possible.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I haven't figured it out yet how to do it on Wix, and I could barely-ish not do it at all when I was on WordPress. So it's just that's more of a technical issue for me to figure out how to do it, because categories is like, I mean, so convenient for a reader to be able to just choose the fitting issues topics, and then you get all those posts like easier to find them. So yeah, that's definitely on my long to-do list.
yeah. Rome wasn't built in one day, as they say in Sweden. Maybe it's a saying in other countries as well.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, you can do whatever you focus on, but like, yeah, I can only focus on one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, it is. And that's the hard part, because ideally you would have to have this wonderful... My most successful periods in life is when I had themed days, but that also requires, like, you have a lot of energy and not too many other things going on in your life. But I used to have like a 5-day schedule, and even though when I was having like a full-time day job, I was still having a couple of days like marked, one for admin, one for the blog, one for YouTube, and that really helped me. So it was like a visual reminder that what thing I was working on. And then I had one day for product development, for instance, a book or a new sewing pattern. But of course, the thing is, I think what you're describing now, because you are working so hard on finishing your next pattern, you get, because it's so much easier to work when you're in a steady flow. Because as we talked about in a previous episode, if you have to do all this task switching, it becomes quite stressful and it's hard to go back. You have to, okay, so how was I supposed to format the pattern now? It's much easier if you just keep on doing it until it's done than having to go back and try to remember all the different ways to do things. So it's a little bit tricky that way, because I think that's probably one of the struggles when you are a solo entrepreneur, as they say, to actually be able to wear all these hats and not get like totally scatterbrained and super stressed out.
Yeah, and I heard, I mean, bigger people on Instagram, like that has really big accounts, that they said that no, but once a week, one day a week, I solely focus on content creating, and it makes total sense. I mean, you should have that like on a regular basis, because then you can also produce content on a more regular basis to actually have one day a week, or how much time you want to spend on it. So I know that's like what I should do, but I don't. Not right now.
Yeah, I think maybe we should dig a little bit deeper in that, because it's just not the task switching. It's also because it's a resistance, because you're not as motivated. Your happy place and where you feel the most comfortable is in pattern development, because that's your profession, that's your skill. So every time you have to venture out of that, there will be a slight resistance, right? So of course, if you have, because you're running your own business, then you have no boss telling you what to do on a specific day. Of course, we're all going to gravitate to where we feel the least resistance, right? So we can argue as much as we want, but that's probably one of the reasons why we don't want to do it, because it just takes much more mental capacity, and it feels a bit uncomfortable compared to some other tasks that we really enjoy.
Yeah, no, definitely, 100% agree with that. But what have you? What content are you planning on for the future now?
Yeah, I need to do everything because I'm sitting on everything. But actually, so my point right now is that I need to focus on the things that gives me the most traction, and which I have talked about in previous episode. Newsletter is extremely effective compared to other type of content that I do. So my main goal right now is to have a consistent publishing schedule for my newsletter. Every other week I have, as I said, hundreds and hundreds of sewing tutorials. I can just go back into the libraries, repackage things, share that stuff. I have so many videos I can share. So I can pick. I have no problem in getting like 25 different topic ideas for the year. That's a no-brainer actually. So I just need to start doing that. So that's my main priority. But I should say that creating a good newsletter, it does take a time, because yesterday I basically spent all afternoon creating content, doing image formatting, and writing text for a newsletter with some quick hacks from our book Fit for Knits. So yeah, it takes a lot of time. But then again, I can see now that yesterday I published it in around 5 o'clock here in Sweden, so it was early morning in North America. And first I had some sales unrelated to the book, but through the email for my sewing patterns. And then I can see on Amazon that both in the UK and the Amazon US, I could see that the sales stats for our book was going up quite a lot and has stayed consistent. I think now it's dropping a little bit. It's almost 24 hours later. But yeah, it's very, very clear. How should I say? There's a clear connection between posting a newsletter and getting a desired result. Whereas if I post maybe a story about our book, for instance, I don't see that kind of sales spikes for our books. So for me, that's what I'm kind of thinking of. And secondly, what I should be doing more is YouTube, because that is also one of the most effective channels for me, because and that's something I plan on starting again more consistently. So yeah, that's my. I would probably never kill it on Instagram, to be honest. I mean, I know it's growing and it's going to be more and more important, and I think we have to get on TikTok soon too, producing reels and everything. You know, like really, it's everything. But right now, because we are so small and have other jobs as well, I'm gonna go a bit old school right now until I have to force myself to do other stuff.
But you are still, I mean, I think you say you don't do so much on Instagram, but I think you're more active than me there, which maybe says something about me. But yeah, no, if your happy zone is in the blog and you see like instant effect when you send out newsletters, and you obviously have all your, like most of your followings are on YouTube, I mean, it makes total sense for you to focus on that. You don't have to be, I mean, there's no law like you have to be on Instagram if you have a business. Like that's not, it doesn't have to be your main focus. And especially when you so much talk about the algorithm, like we don't have really control of what is shown to whom. So, I mean, it makes total sense to focus on, you can control the newsletters, you can control YouTube in a completely different way. So yeah, I mean, don't feel bad that you don't are that active on Instagram. You don't have to be.
That's nice to hear, because I sometimes feel so stressed out about, you know, dropping the balls on all these kind of channels. Because you always feel like you have to do this exact dance of doing everything, because if you're not, you feel like you're missing out on something. But that's also like a recipe of getting burned out about the whole thing. So yeah, you're very right, and I think we talk about that a lot, like understanding your limitations in every area and just work with those instead of trying to be everywhere, and to create top level content everywhere. It's impossible. So yeah, and I also got really inspired by discussing this today. As I said, I have a good understanding, but I'm not always executing it. So I feel just talking with you like this, I got some new ideas on how I want to repurpose and reorganize some of my content, because I'm definitely not always doing the things I say we should all do.
We know what we need to do. It's getting it done that is the difficult part.
Yeah. It's kind of funny because everyone, I'm probably feels like that, but you don't really hear many people talk about this, because you always hear it's very like a polished, oh, you should post this on this platform 3 times a day, or this is how you grow your audience on this or that. But it's like as if everything was that easy, that you would be able to do exactly what you should do when you're just a person trying to run everything and not burning out and like still enjoy it. And so there's a gap between the idea of what you're supposed to be doing and the realities of trying to make that happen, so which is actually impossible.
Yeah, no, definitely. You have to set the bar at a reasonable like level. What is manageable to do, and that's a lot why I find this so interesting to talk about, because we work hard, but we need to work hard in a smart way, because otherwise it's just gonna be like, for example, with the Pinterest. I didn't know exactly how to do it, so I would upload the image separately from my blog and like have to rewrite things, and just to hear that no, you can do it in a more efficient, smart way, like those programs talk to each other. I mean, that's gonna save me a lot of time, so I can focus on other things. So that's it's really helpful.
Yeah, it is. And there are so many different apps now as well. I mean, because I'm just talking from my experience, there might be apps that can automatically post your preferred pin from Instagram or whatever. I mean, there's so many options. Absolutely. So if you can just, and that's one of my, speaking of streamlining things, it's one of my, on my to-do list is to start uploading, because we talked about reels, which I don't do that many, but I have done a few that I think are really good. There's no reason for me not to post them on YouTube Shorts. I should definitely post them on Instagram as well. So I'm gonna try now to see if what type of apps can do this for me, because the problem is with all this, like we talked about SmarterQ later, there are lots of different publishing tools. They all have their limitations, so it's really difficult to just have settle for one. And also, of course, we should say that Facebook or Meta, they have their own content publishing system within Facebook, so you can post both on Instagram and on the Facebook feed. It's just that I absolutely hate the interface. I should do explicit words here, but you can imagine what I was going to say. And it absolutely sucks. It's horrible, and I use it in my day job. And if something is too painful to use, I don't want to use it. So they make it. I don't know. Maybe you have a different experience, but so there are free versions you can use it, but it's a disaster. They're changing it every time. Every quarter they have changed something, and it's changed names, so you don't know how to use it or where to find it. Sorry for the rant, but that's my thoughts on the Meta publishing tools.
But you listening, do you, like our listeners, do you have any tips for us? Like, write us a comment. We should say that you can either write it in our here on YouTube if you listen to us on the YouTube channel, and we also have an Instagram account now. that you can post if you have any tips, tricks, or your best ideas or suggestions, questions. We would love to hear from you. So the Instagram is stitchingtalespod, right?
Yes, Stitching Tale Pod. So there's a post for each episode. So you can also, if you're listening to older episodes, you can just go there and write comments. Because what we're doing on that Instagram account is also that because most of you listening are listening, and so sometimes we talk about a lot of different things, but it's hard to show. But if you go over to our Instagram account, Stitching Tales Pod, we have uploaded images so you can see visually a lot of the things that we are talking about, which I think is a really helpful companion to this pod. So, and also it's a way, if you're not using YouTube, as Malena says, that you can actually interact with us and give us some ideas and suggestions. And so keep the discussion going there on Stitching Tales Pods. Of course, it's going to be linked in the show notes for this pod as well, for sure. We're going to make sure that happens. So it's a soft launch now. We have done a poor job at pitching it, speaking of doing great marketing, but it's there. So and we're going to keep updating it.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, then. Well, thank you so much for listening. I am Johanna Lundström.
And I am Malena Hjerpe.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.